Okay.
Yeah, what a fantastic opportunity. This time is not just us.
Yeah.
We've got our very first guests in the conversations.
That's right.
Because people have been asking about us having a guest, and we thought, who should we have as our first guest? And of course, none other than our best friend, very good friend, fantastic Twimukye, who we have known for a while. We've known you for about 8 years, Twimukye.
Yes, I think so.
Yeah, one of the very first people to help us actually to engage and to think about partnering with other organizations.
That's correct, yeah.
So it's a real delight to still be working with you, first of all, but even more delightful that you are our very first guest. And what a fantastic story you've got, Twimukye. You've been in this field longer than we have.
And what is interesting is there are a lot of people in the community who have got fantastic stories. And I think this challenge, this crisis has kind of brought everything to the surface.
Yes.
And it's created an opportunity for everyone to share their stories.
Yes.
So having a guest like Twimukye to come on and share her side of the story, I think is fantastic.
And it's really good because when you have a pandemic such as this, the coronavirus pandemic, and then obviously we had the circumstances, the very sad circumstances in America with Black Lives Matter. It's a time for everybody to reflect, and you hope that employers, Scotland, will reflect and see things maybe in a different way. We've all had time, so there are no excuses. We can't say we didn't have time to reflect. So thank you very much, Twimukye, for joining us. Would you like to tell us?
For having me. It's a real honor and a privilege to be here with you this afternoon.
Thank you. Thank you. So I'd like to say a lot about you, but I'd really like you to say about yourself. So please introduce yourself.
My name is Twimukye Mushaka. Most call me Twimukye Mushaka. Maclean is a bit silent. I describe myself as an activist because I've been an activist for all my life. Growing up as a disabled girl with a hearing impairment really shaped the way I lived my life and how I interacted with society. I work with the Poverty Alliance as a senior fieldwork development officer. And I have an opportunity and the privilege to be able to be part of the story that campaigns for change, that influences change, that work with people with lived experience of to shape this we want. And privilege to be here again, part of what you are doing.
Fantastic. Well, so today we are going to be talking about unemployment and underemployment. For somebody who is a Black woman and with a disability, you must know a lot about that. By the time we started working in that field in Scotland, you were already working in that field. So it's a bit of a challenge when people come to Scotland. When they move to Scotland, we have our own story. People have different stories. So you came to Scotland at a time when you were already skilled, qualified, you were doing so much, you had traveled to different parts of the world, which was in those times to travel from Uganda to other parts of the world to work, you had to be real good.
And it was valued.
Yes, it was valued. So, but then you get here and it's a completely different story, right?
Yeah, interesting indeed. You've already touched on that history because I was an activist and I continue to be an activist. Opportunity to work with a range of disability organizations in Africa and internationally. And that gave me an opportunity to travel widely in the most part of the world, getting disabled people's voices heard in places that matter and influencing change in order to give disabled people a chance to be considered as human beings, to be respected as human beings. And that for me was my founding work. as an executive director. Before I came, I was coming from an organization where I was the head, and everything crashed down when events in my life changed and ended up in Glasgow years ago. One of the things, obviously, that was challenging is the way the system of immigration worked in Scotland, because I was an asylum seeker, I was not allowed to work. There were a lot of things at that time that my children were not entitled to. Remember, my youngest then was 3. We were living in Torregreen, and to go to nursery, would only be able to be admitted in a nursery if there were a space available, if there were no local people that needed that space.
Wow.
My social worker at that time managed to get a place for Pauline in Gobos, where we live at the moment. Organized a taxi to take her to nursery and take her back home, because I was not very well at that time. Pauline ended up getting at least nursery education because we were not eligible for that. When I came, asylum seekers at that point only got vouchers. We are not even eligible for cash support. And I know that was part of the activism that influenced government policy to change from vouchers to cash, because we talked about how that stigmatized the user. You calculate how much you need to buy from a supermarket in order to spend the exact amount of money on the voucher. It was
wow,
a difficult time. Anyway, I was frozen in the immigration system for 8 years. I call it being frozen and taken out of the freezer 8 years. I refused to be frozen. I'm an ice cube. To be part of the Scottish story, began volunteering. My first job was with Glasgow Women's Library, 2004, I think. And while I was there, there was an effort to organize the first Refugee Women's Conference. I was introduced to Scottish Refugee Council. My story of activism around refugees and asylum seekers in Scotland began then. So if there is a lot that I can say about that, but my story started to change. Through that, I then became involved with Caribou Scotland. It pains my heart that the organization is no longer in existence because of lack of funding, but also because of leadership vacuum, because as more women became busy in their own work, there were volunteers to keep Caribou Scotland running. Caribou Scotland was Henriette Kubakwenda's baby, I would say, and that she was the vision about what Caribou Scotland could do, and I was a mouthpiece. Whatever she thought, I vocalized that. And that gave us a very good working partnership. For me, my volunteering work with Caribou Scotland was very, very rewarding. The places, believe you me, as an asylum seeker, I was flown to London twice to Westminster to give evidence to the Scottish Parliament, not Scottish Parliament, Westminster Parliament.
Wow.
So to give presentations about what we were trying to do around integration, by I was still in terms of actual things, but still trying to keep my head above the in terms of being involved at high level, being, an activist on behalf of others, and getting that voice heard in places that mattered. And for me, that volunteering work, I could not fault it.
Wow.
How to make funding applications from a Scottish perspective. Believe you me, I knew how to write project proposals in Africa. And I actually realized that the way we project proposals in Africa for big charitable causes was different from the way it's done here.
Yeah.
So that was a learning curve for me, but one that was very helpful for my skills, but also for keeping my head and mind active. So I don't become an ice tube in the fleet that I was in.
And that's the thing. That's you've mentioned quite interesting points there. You mentioned the fact that people got busy or people had to do stuff because there was a leadership vacuum. But you've also talked about the fact that you had to do volunteering to keep your head above the water. And that's really an issue because you got great stuff out of it, but sometimes it doesn't work out like that. Sounds like you knew what you wanted from it and you carried on with it. And also you were working with an organization where you could support the leadership and still remain in leadership. Other people don't get that opportunity.
That's right,
You have worked with different people in the migrant community that don't have that opportunity.
Exactly. Yeah, I think for me, that was an opportunity, as I say, because it was something that I was very passionate about. I think one of the things we need to acknowledge is that volunteers don't simply volunteer for the sake of it. Volunteer because they have a passion. Volunteer because they want to gain something from it. They want to try and influence something for better. Case in those many years ago was about making a smaller difference, however small it was, in the experiences of asylum seekers and refugees in Scotland. Because that was my story, I knew that if I didn't do it, nobody would do that for me.
That's right,
I needed to be at the forefront of that struggle. But where we volunteer in someone else's agenda, the story is different.
Yes.
So it's important that when we work with volunteers, we understand what their passion is.
Absolutely.
Them to volunteer. I do work with a lot of volunteers, but these are volunteers who are already keen to talk about the experiences of poverty. Because that's their passion, that's their life story. Meaningful.
It is actually, you've mentioned something really important. It's incumbent on the actual organizations that are supporting or taking on the volunteers to ensure that they get something out of it as well. I remember we used to have volunteers, like different volunteers, and we got to a stage where we were unsatisfied with their work, but they were, more importantly, they were unsatisfied. And it wasn't that we were unsatisfied because they weren't helping. It was because we were thinking, yes, this is great with what they're doing, but what are they getting out of it? And how are they growing from it? And I think it's important that us as organizations start to really think, if somebody comes to work with you, this is actually what we do now. We sit with the person and we try and get a plan for them.
And I think it's that point of valuing the contribution of the volunteer. I think sometimes the biggest challenge is pushing people into volunteering and people getting into it, but actually not even valuing whatever contribution that the volunteers make.
I think that's where we need to start. You know, when you say that when you got here, you didn't even get a nursery place because unless somebody in the community didn't need it, that is very painful. The fact that you are not valued, you're not appreciated, and that runs through the employment system.
That's correct.
Because your skills, your qualifications, they are not seen as something that will contribute to the economy or to the workplace. And sometimes we end up with, you know, your aspirations are quashed. So what happens to you when you come out of that? You've been volunteering and now you've got, you know, residence permit. How do you move from that, Twimukye?
So in terms of the journey to employment, I must say that was one of the lucky ones. There's the time when I was sharing a panel with someone else. I said I applied for 6 jobs and at least go one of them. And this other person said, you are very lucky because I applied for hundreds and hundreds.
Oh.
So I think the application process for the jobs was much easier for me as part of my work with and I had made teachers programs, and I had gone a course in terms, they used to call it Equipped for the Future. Looked at things like you fill an application form, what information do you put in your CV. My CV, as I came into this country, was 8 pages.
I know, because our CVs are like that. You have to show what you know.
Yes.
That's different.
Yes.
I had 8 pages. It had every pitch I had ever made. It had every job I had ever held. It had all my education history.
Yeah.
It even had the fact I was female and deaf.
Yes.
Things that would not be acceptable in this country.
Yes.
Then, so they said, look, if you put your CV like this, you are more likely not to be selected.
Yeah.
That was one of the greatest support I ever got.
Yeah.
Journey to employment, learning how the employment system works in this country. In Africa, it's the volume of the CV, which
that's right.
You are knowledgeable, have had long work experience.
Yes.
Yeah, the education sometimes it doesn't matter. It's about it's for the job.
That's correct.
And how you market your skills and competence. That training for me was a starting point, and I must acknowledge that.
Yeah.
So I got interviewed, and I got the job. So for me, I think it was not that it was smooth sailing. It hard work in terms of preparation work towards. Also, to be honest, I had the competencies for it, so there were no doubts about that. And because I had spent a long time within the Scottish sector, I was able to demonstrate that. So that's how I managed it. But I must say, as I stated, is that not everyone is easy. And some people may not have that initial training that helped me to position myself. I was giving myself big titles because at one point I worked as an advisor, as a consultant. Ability matters at that level. And in this country, consultants, professors, people with doctorate. So to reevaluate myself in terms of trying to find my level. And so people need to know who are they in the employment journey and where are they beginning from. I think
that's true. But I want to pick on that. When you say people need to know who are they, are you suggesting that there is a way in which you should package yourself? Because for me, that sounds like you then have to fit into a certain box. Because what makes you not a consultant is the system here, rather than the fact that you actually are a consultant by other standards. So how do you balance that? Because a lot of people do not actually reach their aspirations, they don't achieve. We had volunteering just like you, we managed the project, but we never got anywhere without volunteering. Nobody really wanted to know. And it wasn't that we didn't have the qualifications or the skills. So when you say people, so how do you balance that, or is there even any opportunity to balance that actually?
No, I think it's also important to understand the environment under which we work. how the systems of power and structures work. I mean, for me, as a person who had never held a job in Scotland, having been frozen for 8 years, it would have been foolhardy for me to expect I was going to get a job as a director of an organization straight away. I needed to reposition my priorities in terms of what I could do and not do in those particular circumstances. You see where that is really important. And I'm not saying that we couldn't have consultants who are people who are migrants to this country. It depends on the competences that they hold. Why, for instance, in terms of the system that we have in place at the moment, is that if you're a migrant and you're a doctor, if you're a migrant and you're a nurse and you have a postgraduate in something, yes, you have staked. If you're a migrant and you're an academic, because you can stake your claim in those competences. But with me, with one first degree and some postgraduate training here and there, may not be yet. And that's what I understand now in repositioning ourselves to know the system we operate in and how we can navigate it to our advantage, but also acknowledging the value.
And that is key, because what you said there is that the system works in a certain way. Yeah. Would it be the same if a white person with a degree came to your country? Because would that change things? Would they also need to then reposition?
Interestingly, you've asked me that. We know that when a person with the degree that I hold comes to my country of origin, there will be an expatriate.
Yeah.
Yes. And not only that, even here, somebody with a first degree, do they also need to reposition themselves the same way you had to reposition yourself?
No. In fact, I should say that's one of the things I wanted to talk about in terms of the system that keep us behind, system that acknowledges the qualification that we hold. Because originally from a Commonwealth country, and my degree was based on the British system.
That's right.
Was able to verify. That's one of the first things I did, to verify that my university degree was the
You even went ahead and did that. You verified your degree.
Exactly, yes, through NARIC. I can't remember what NARIC stood for, but there was an organization called NARIC, and you had to present your evidence of your degree certificate, which I have with my academic transcript. And yes, this person has the equivalent of a Scottish university degree. Yeah. So for people from a French-speaking country, for example, Portuguese-speaking country, bit of a challenge in translating those qualifications.
That's right, yeah.
But I think there was an attempt to do that when, I don't know if it's still in existence, but I think I must say that from a Commonwealth country that English was the official language, there was an advantage in terms of getting the qualification.
Thank you for watching part 1 with Twimukye on the challenges of employment in Scotland. Watch out for part 2, and please remember to like, share and subscribe to our channel.